What is going on, alpha males? Welcome to Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values. After all, we are made in the image of God, strong, dominant, and in control, and we don't apologize for that. Now, hopefully, you tune into this podcast mostly because we dive into deep philosophical stuff and important topics. Today is going to be more of a fun episode on gear, and hopefully you just find it good and fun and entertaining and some useful gear. One, because it was requested by a patron. I'm here to serve you guys. That's why I do the podcast. I do it to serve. It's a request from a patron. Also, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm tired. I say this a lot on Gunfighter Life, and I don't pretend that everybody that listens to this listens to Gunfighter Life. So I'll say it real quick here. I, for years, tried to make the podcast a full-time income. It is not yet a full-time income. I would rather fail with integrity than take what I would consider bribes, sponsors, things like that. Disagree with communism, but then take a Chinese flashlight or optics company as a sponsor or whatever. Take any sponsors. I consider that a bribe. So, if you want to support the podcast, it's supported by patrons, so consider becoming a patron. But getting back to being tired, I went back to being a professional gunfighter, a security contract work, making that mercenary money, which is really good money, but it's a long schedule. The last day that I worked, I left at 4:30 something in the morning and got back, I think, after 7 p.m. at night. It's a rough schedule, which is one of the reasons I got out of it last time. But trying to save up that money, and I'm a little tired. And this is, to be honest, it's a pretty easy episode to talk about. It's not as mentally draining as a deep philosophical episode. So with that, just giving you some housekeeping, let's get into the bio and then the main topic. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as an instructor, an urban warfare instructor, and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and in some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years. Also NRA certified and some other 3-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder. Certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life, and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie, where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God, all the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through. I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength, it's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because he had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talent, skills, and abilities to serve you today. So if you guys know about the other podcast, Gunfighter Life, I do a lot on guns and all different aspects of that. But today I wanted to do an episode on Alpha Male on stuff not necessarily specifically about guns or ammunition or things like that. There's a whole lot of other stuff. And stuff is not the most important. It can be a force multiplier for your skill. But if you have 0 skill, whatever you multiply by 0 is still 0. With that, let's talk about some cool kit. How about packs? I do quite a bit of rucking. I'd say a lot more than average. I try and stay on top of that. Rucking in the wilderness, rucking in urban areas, rucking, carrying a heavy pack for time, distance, cardio, that kind of thing. I recently got a new pack that replaced the one that I've had, maybe not replaced completely, but largely become my go-to pack. And that is the Eberly Stock Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation RMEF pack in dark green Loden color. It's a fantastic pack. It allows you to carry a crazy amount of weight, and the temptation is to fill it up with stuff, which is not what you should do. You should carry what you need, and if you need to carry extra, like an elk, which is what it was designed to do, pack out an elk, then you have that capacity. So I have to fight hard to not cram it full of stuff because it's so accommodating of gear. It's a good pack. It's a hard frame pack, which generally I don't like. I generally like a soft frame pack, but this one is done really, really well. I saw one and messed around with it, and then months later I still wanted one, which is one of kind of my tips. Don't just buy everything you want, because then just kind of a waste of money and you'll forget about it. But if it's something you want for a while and you still think about it and you still think it'll be useful, that was the case with this pack. Actually, my wife got it for me for a birthday present. It's a good pack, and I don't have any sponsors here, but I like Eberly Stock. I like the way they do their stuff. For years before that, I used an Eberly Stock Gun Runner, which would be my number one recommendation if you're getting into this. The Eberly Stock Gun Runner or a Just One is a fantastic pack. The RMEF is kind of a bigger, beefier pack. I literally think, I'm not even being sarcastic, I could strap my wife on that pack and carry her around on the RMEF pack. It's a fantastic pack. I like the Eberly Stock, and again, they're not a sponsor or anything. They don't pay me anything to say this. I don't get any special, thing for talking about them on the podcast, but they have a pretty quiet material for the pack, which I like. I'm a spot and stalk hunter, so I like that aspect. I also like that they have a scabbard for guns on a lot of their packs where the gun goes down the middle. I like that because it doesn't throw out the weight dispersion nearly as much. There's some other systems where the gun, like a long gun, gets mounted to the side. So you either have to pack the pack, accounting for that gun on the side, and then when you take it off, it's unbalanced. Or when you do something and you want your hands free and you put the gun in there, then the pack is off balance. I don't like that. I don't like the gun being strapped to one side or the other. I like it down the middle. I also like that I can reach behind my head and grab it and pull it out. Only thing I really don't like about that system is that you carry it with the muzzle down, and I'm really particular about taking care of the crowns of my rifles. That said, I haven't had that be a problem in the years that I've used these packs, but it is something to consider. But Eberly Stocks, I think they're a great pack. They're a good value. And again, that Gun Runner pack is a good loadout size, especially if you don't do a lot of rucking. But I got to the point where I was doing a lot of rucking, and I thought, I could carry a heavier pack than this after years of using the other one. And also was doing quite a bit of elk hunting. It just made sense to get that pack, and I have had it for months now. I'm not the guy that gets something and unboxes it and does a review. Generally, I like to actually use the kit, and I've done quite a bit of rucking with that pack, and I like it. It's a good pack. It's perhaps the first hard frame pack that I've ever liked, that I've ever actually used hardcore. I could say the Alice pack, I like that pack, but I've never actually used one a lot. This pack I like. It's a hard frame pack. It's a good pack. And that's the Eberly Stock RMEF, and also the Eberly Stock Gun Runner. Still probably be my number one choice. And this is I'm not a guy If you don't know, my wife and I, we live as neo-nomads. We travel around the country. We live tiny. And it's like my bag. It's like my big bag. I still kept the other one just in case. But like, it's my bug out bag. It's my going hunting bag. It's my going out survivaling bag in the wilderness to be out in the wilderness. It's my bag. And it's a good one. My other sling bag, and I kind of have a different approach to this than most people. I have my main bug out bag, and then I have what I would call like a EDC line 2 gear bag. And I've kind of, I think, coined the term baby bug out bag. It's got the core essentials in a small sling bag. And my concept for this is I don't have it on me all the time, but I like to have it within sprinting distance. So if something happens, I can sprint to this bag. Like, I might not have it with me in the gym, but it's right outside in the car. I can sprint from inside the gym to the car. I might not have it wearing it all day at work as a, security contractor, but I can sprint to it. You have like core essentials in there: emergency medical kit, tourniquet, extra ammo, water procurement, like the basic hardcore stuff. And if that's all I have, that's a big force multiplier. If I have the time, I'll grab it and I'll just simply throw it inside the bigger pack. Or if I get to a base of operations and I want to drop my big pack and still go reconnoitering, I'll drop the big pack and take the smaller pack. So that's like the baby bug out bag. And the sling bag that I've used for, I don't know, 9 years, 12 years, 15 years, somewhere in there, is the Maxpedition VersaPack. And I think it might be the VersaPack Max or something like that. I've had it a long time, and it looks like it. It's pretty worn out. It's a fantastic pack. It served me well for a lot of years. But I find myself in a little bit of a different situation. So I'm looking at a different pack. I haven't gotten that pack and run it through its paces yet. So I'm not going to really talk about that pack a lot, but it has a different philosophy behind it. And I think I will talk about that. I've already mentioned it to the patrons, but I think I'll talk about that after I've actually used it for a bit. But before I got rid of this old pack, I wanted to mention that Maxpedition VersaPack. I like a lot about it. The thing I really don't like is that it looks like a tactical pack. It kind of looks tactical. It has Molly. It's, coyote brown, which normally I wouldn't care about. But with my new thing that I'm doing, it doesn't make the most sense. So I'll probably keep that bag for a spare, a backup bag, or like a situational bag, maybe a bailout bag, but probably not for my main go-to baby bob, my baby bug out bag. Let's talk about one of the most practical pieces of kit. Socks. 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 In order for your hands to do anything, in order for your hands to fight, in order for you to use your most tactical of tactical kit, your feet have to get you there. And if you've ever had bloody, nasty feet, you'll know what a conundrum that is. Socks are super important. They might not be the most tactical. They might not be the multi-cam plate carrier or the Scar 17 or the cool S35 VN survival knife, but they're probably more practical. And I'm not just talking about any old socks. I'm not talking about some garbage cotton polyester blend Walmart bulk bargain pack. If you want to wear those to go to sleep in or something, that's fine. But for hardcore use, I like a couple of different things. I like 100% merino wool. I like 100% alpaca wool. I like 100% nylon socks. And I like 100% polyester socks. I don't like mixing and matching. Sometimes I will use a combo, like a really tight pair of 100% nylon socks that are really tight fitting, and then put a thicker, warmer, padded pair of like 100% alpaca wool socks on top of that. That's kind of an old Marine Corps infantryman trick. Those really tight socks, if you have any kind of play between the boot and your socks and the feet, it'll rub on that tight inner sock and hopefully save your feet from getting bloody and blistery and nasty, because you're wearing out that sock instead of your actual foot. So like if you have a little bit of play in that boot and that outer sock will rub, but that inner sock will be tight to your foot. Also, it can help wick moisture. Things like polyester, if it's 100% polyester, they're hydrophobic, which means they don't like to be wet. So it'll move that moisture out away from your foot to the other sock, or out of your boot entirely, depending on your boot. But Socks are super important, and again, not the garbage cotton polyester mixed cheap socks. I mean, they're better than nothing, but of all the things you spend money on for Tacti-Cool kit, socks are super important. In order for your hands to do any fighting, your feet are going to have to get you there. Don't skip leg day at the gym, skip cardio, and don't just spend all your money on Tacti-Cool stuff without practical stuff like really good socks. Socks are important. Another one, string. Maybe not as tactical as knives or guns or body armor, but string is pretty useful. Strings probably should be part of your EDC. And the big go-to for survival is 550 cord, 550 cord, 550 cord. And there's nothing wrong with 550 cord. It is what it is. It does what it does. But it's not the best for every application. You may also want to look at Kevlar cordage. Yes, they make Kevlar cordage. As you might imagine, it's very strong. It's very lightweight. Unlike 550 cord, it's fairly heat resistant, which means it won't melt, which might be a good thing depending on the application. But Kevlar cordage, you can get some that's maybe even thinner, certainly I think lighter than 550 cord, that instead of 550 pounds is over 1,000 pounds. Now, you don't always need that much. I'm not saying you do. They make it in different thicknesses. You can get much thinner cord that's about the same strength. And I'm not saying it's always better than 550 cord, but not everything is best served with 550 cord. I think we fall into this trap that, 550 cord is always the best. But it's not. There's Kevlar cordage, and then if you're familiar with like high-end fishing, there's Spectra. Spectra, it can also be really useful if you want a really thin, really strong cord, or you want to have a lot of strong string in a small package. The Spectra, like Spider Wire is a big name brand, but there's other stuff too, like Bass Pro Shop has an Excel brand, which to me looks basically the same as a lot of the Spider Wire from way back in the day. I remember when it came out and when I was big into fishing. That's kind of like the quintessential brand, but there's a lot of other brands of Spectra cordage, and there's Kevlar cordage. Again, really strong, really lightweight, heat resistant. I mean, it will burn at some point, but it won't sit there and melt at low temperatures like 550 cord will, which is made mostly, I think, of polyester. Another one, Kevlar panels, something like a Kevlar trauma plate. And not just for body armor, that's obviously a big thing they're made for, is body armor. And you certainly can use them in body armor, but for many other things. They might be part of that baby bug out bag I was talking about, or your everyday kind of emergency bag. One, they're bulletproof, so you could have it as a sling bag, have it as an option, have it in the back of a backpack. They're also multi-use. They are, again, heat resistant, so if you're trying to grab something hot, that's the application for those. Also, if you just need like a ground pad, like if you're in a really wet, cold, nasty environment and you want to stop that cold, wet ground from sucking heat out of your body, you can sit on them. You can use them as like a quasi ground pad or a hip pad. Sleeping, standing up, is not the best solution, but it's better than freezing to death. And having something like that, it doesn't have to be that. It could be a ground pad or a small sleeping pad or a inflatable pillow or something, but something that really stops the sucking out of heat from your body or stopping you from getting wet every time you sit down in some environments. That can be a big deal. So those Kevlar pads. And oftentimes you can find expired ones on like eBay for really cheap. And maybe you don't want to make that your go-to body armor, an expired Kevlar pad, but all the other secondary uses we talked about, it's still good for that. So you might consider those Kevlar pads. Very strong, very lightweight, good for a lot of things other than just the body armor. Another thing I'd like to talk about, I'm always on the quest, right, to like upgrade the EDC, have a better everyday carry setup. One thing that I've done and I really like is I generally before this, I had a lot of stuff loose in my pocket, like in my support side pocket. I generally carry a full-size fighting handgun on my strong side, and then a spare magazine and a fixed blade knife on my support side. And in my support side pocket, I carry some fairly random stuff, like a way to make fire, maybe a ferro rod, maybe a lighter, some of that cordage we talked about, like the Kevlar cordage, water purification tablets. And before, I would just kind of have that stuff hanging out in my pocket. Well, recently what I've done is put that stuff in a small tin. It's not actually an Altoids tin, but about the size of an Altoids tin. And I just put that in my pocket, and I just have a piece of, I don't think it would come open, but I have a piece of bicycle tubing, rubber tubing around it to keep it closed, and because that stuff is really good for starting fires. But what I found is it keeps all that stuff in the pocket, and sometimes in the past I would grab things out of my pocket and then forget other things because they were just fell down in the pocket and they'd go through the wash. It's a lot harder to do that with a tin. Like, it's hard to miss the tin in your pocket when you're transferring from, like, oh, these pants are dirty, I'm putting stuff into new pants. Or, for me, almost every day, I'm going from my civilian clothes to my work clothes and back. It's a lot harder to miss something when it's all in one tin. There is the argument to be made that all of my eggs are in that one basket, so if it fell out of my pocket, I would lose everything. But I actually have gone to really like that system. And again, that's just like it literally could be an Altoids tin in your pocket with the stuff in it. Something like that you would use often, like a multivitamins, water purification tablets, whatever kind of cordage you want, a couple of fish hooks, whatever you generally EDC. But having it in that tin I've found to be very useful. Another thing, talking about, general survival and hiking and packing and all manner of outdoor things. One thing that's really, really useful for certain applications is titanium. Titanium water bottles, titanium shovel, actually. You wouldn't think so, but a little tiny, like, hand shovel is used quite often for a lot of things. You can use it as an emergency stake for pounding into the ground for something you need, like a pretty strong stake for. You can use it as a shovel for a shovel will come in handy for a lot of things. One, it is written in the Bible, you shall have an implement among your equipment. When you go to the bathroom, in your camp, you shall turn and cover your refuse. We're very practical for when you go to the bathroom to cover that up. That's a real practical use for the shovel. Another real practical use for it, other than an emergency stake like we talked about, is if you've ever built like primitive shelter with tarps and stuff out in the wilderness, which is generally what I do. I generally don't carry a tent. Digging a small trench if you're expecting rain or you're on some kind of topography where it's not going to dry out, just making a small trench so that the water runs into the trench and then away from your shelter so you don't get soaked when it rains. Something like that. Could you do it with your hands? Yeah. Could you do it with a rock or a stick? You could, or a knife, but those small titanium shovels are just so lightweight and so handy. It's hard to justify not having one. They're a very useful piece of kit. Titanium water bottles, as I alluded to, it's just that stuff adds up, that weight adds up, and titanium is good for a lot of things. On that, I have a regular titanium, just a uninsulated titanium water bottle that I really like. But one thing I've been using a lot, because one of the things I do the most, the skills I use the most in the wilderness, is water purification. Because water is heavy. I generally don't carry all my water with me. I get it as I go. My general go-to recommendation for that is the water tablets. And I still think that's a go-to recommendation. But if you do it a lot, you may want to look at the Grail. The Grail is a system that I've been using for a lot of months now in all different environments. And they make different ones. They make plastic ones. I have the titanium one because I can take the inner stuff out and use the titanium container to cook in, to boil water in, to sterilize stuff in. Again, that titanium container is multi-use, just like the shovel. But it also has, I guess, what I would call like a water purification piston. It has like rubber seal. It has like if you can picture this, you could probably look it up. Audio is probably not the best to describe this, but it has like a rubber gasket seal. And you put non-purified water in the bottom container, and then you shove this water filter on top of it in a watertight seal, and you push it through. And it becomes clean water and ends up inside the inner water bottle, which you can then drink. It's a pretty cool system. It takes about 10 seconds to push it through. It's not the fastest, easiest thing in the world, but it's pretty good. It's a lot faster than waiting on water tabs, and it's a lot better, I think, if you do a lot of it. If you just want something just in case you don't actually use your stuff, a life straw would be fine. But if you use your stuff a lot, these filters are supposed to last like a year. That Grail, I think, is an absolutely really cool piece of kit if you actually spend legitimate time in the backcountry drinking dirty water. That Grail system is really cool, and I wanted to mention it. Again, no affiliation, I don't get any kickbacks or anything, but it's a really cool system. If you're in a more urban environment, talking about the titanium, it doesn't have to be. It could be steel, but steel's probably a little bit heavy for EDC or even your baby bug out bag. Titanium pry bars. Pry bars come in really handy for all kinds of things, something you just want leverage on. For breaching, or when I was a commander of a tactical team, one of the most common things was wanting the door to stay open. Like you opened the door and you were rushing through it and you didn't want to get locked in, or the rest of your tactical team to get locked out, or have to worry about using a key fob all the time if the power goes out. So once you breach a door, you shove a block of some kind into the door to keep it open. They make specialty stuff for that, but that's kind of a one-time use thing, or a one-trick pony. Like a titanium pry bar can be used for that. It can be used for all kinds of other things. It can be used for really hardcore getting into something if you don't want to chip a really good knife blade. Now, I would if I had to in an emergency, but having that, titanium pry bar or something like that you can pound in, let's say with the back of your knife instead of messing up the blade of your knife that you might need later, for holding a door open, for prying a door open, not for any nefarious purpose, just prying a door open. If you ever locked your keys in your car for like making a wedge, you can get a coat hanger in there and unlock your door if you've ever had to do that. There's a lot of reasons why a little small titanium pry bar could come in really handy. And they're so lightweight that you probably would actually carry it, unlike, a small stainless steel pry bar. That's a good thing to have in your car, but again, if you locked your car, not going to do you a lot of good if you locked it in your car and you need to get to it. So titanium, good for a lot of things. That titanium pry bar, you might consider that if you spend a lot of time in an urban environment. Another thing to consider are carabiners. Now I'm going to be honest, for a lot of things, just the cheap aluminum, $1 or maybe with inflation $2 carabiners will work for a lot of things. If you're just trying to hang stuff off your pack, those cheap aluminum, like Dollar Tree kind of carabiners will do most things pretty good. Like if you're just trying to clip keys onto a pack or clip a water bottle onto your pack or something like that, they'll work fine. They're fine, those cheap carabiners. If you're trying to do something else like clip your pack onto something, like clip your entire pack onto something, the outside of an armored vehicle, or up inside the back of your truck so it doesn't go flopping out if you're four-wheel driving or something like that, something heavy duty, an actual climbing carabiner. Most of those cheap ones should say not for climbing. But if you actually want to climb, you probably know what you need if you're actually rappelling or rock climbing. So I'm not going to get into that. But just for heavy use, you might want a big locking, again, titanium or strong steel carabiner. Those things, again, the cheap ones will do a lot of what you need. So just, I guess, know the difference. If you just need to do something simple, like, again, hold some keys on or hold a water bottle on, the cheap ones will probably do fine. If you want heavy-duty stuff, you might look at a heavy-duty carabiner. Whatever brand you want, whatever material you want, the best suits your need. Again, if you're trying to save ounces for like packing and stuff, titanium or something may be useful. If you don't care, a big heavy-duty locking steel carabiner, pretty good. There are different styles of carabiners. There's like the S carabiners that have a thing on both sides if you want to separate stuff. Those can be sometimes pretty useful and handy. But there's a whole rabbit hole of carabiners. But don't just always, I guess, even though they'll do most of what you need most of the time, don't always just assume that the cheap carabiners are just as good as, because they're not. Sometimes you might want a bigger, beefier carabiner. And not just, obviously, for climbing, and if you're going rappelling, you don't want a Dollar Tree carabiner. But even if you're doing something like hanging your heavy pack on something, probably not worth damaging stuff in your pack for saving a few bucks on a carabiner. So carabiners are their own thing. Do your own research. There's all different kinds of carabiners, different materials, different designs, different locking and non-locking. But do your research. Sometimes a good carabiner is worth the money. And there's a lot of stuff you'll buy and you'll think you use it all the time and you won't. But a carabiner is probably something, if you're actually doing the stuff, that you'll use quite a bit. Another one is the ferro rod. Ferro rods, if you don't know, they're some kind of metal amalgamation of different metals, iron, and some other elements. I'm not a metallurgist, right? I'm not a molecular chemist, but it's a mixture of different elements, metallic, that when you hit it with something hard, whether it's metal or a rock, will create a spark. Ferrocerium rods, or ferro rods, are pretty useful. Just like carabiners, though, there's really cheap ones and there's much better good ones. It really depends on what you want. But I found that a big beefy ferro rod that you know how to use properly, and there's a technique, right? You could have the best ferro rod in the world, but if you don't know how to make tinder and you don't know how to strike it and you don't know how to build and maintain a fire, you're probably just hitting it to make sparks. So I actually practice with the things, but ferrocerium rods also come in like the dirt cheap, and they're pretty good. So if you just want to play around and have fun, get a dirt cheap one and practice with it. If you want a really good one, consider a substantially sized, good ferrocerium rod. And another thing I'm going to talk about, again, there's kit that you think you're going to use a lot and kit that you actually do use a lot. Something that I actually do use quite a bit is a flashlight as part of my EDC. And I have a lot of experience with a lot of different brands, and I'm not really loyal to any one, but probably the best value right now is Streamlight that I'm aware of. Streamlight's a pretty decent brand. I have a lot of experience with them. And why I wanted to talk about that is technology has come a long way in a short amount of time. It wasn't that long ago I remember using a mini mag light, like in the military, a mini mag light, which is like 60 lumens. There are really small, really bright, and handy EDC lights that are now USB or mini USB rechargeable. That's pretty cool, because if you use them all the time, you probably just don't, even unless you're already set up to like use rechargeable AAA batteries or something, but it's just super convenient to every once in a while or on your way home from work at the end of the week, plug in your little flashlight in your car or in your house so the next day it's fully charged. You know, those little mini USB rechargeable flashlights, it doesn't have to be Streamlight. It could be a bunch of other brands that are probably good. There's probably some that are way better, but just a mini rechargeable USB flashlight for part of your EDC. And again, unless you just already have the thing set up for rechargeable batteries or you just want to buy batteries, but those can be really, really handy. And they've come so far as technology and affordability and just cool features and lumens. So if you don't already, consider making a small rechargeable mini USB. In a pinch, you can use your cell phone flashlight, but it's nowhere near as good as a dedicated actual flashlight. So just consider those. I think that is something that if you get, you will actually use quite a bit and will come in quite handy. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this fun gear talk, this Tacti-Cool kit talk. Remember, the kit can be a force multiplier, but if you don't have the skill and you multiply anything by 0, it's still 0. So have the skill, right? Hopefully you get the stuff so you can spend more time out in the backcountry, more time doing survival type stuff, learning skills, urban or wilderness, whatever it is. Don't just get the stuff. Then you're just a dude with stuff. Nothing wrong with that, but if you're actually serious, have the skill and pair it with the stuff. Tactical tip of the day. Sometimes kit can have more than its primary function, and the more you know about secondary, tertiary functions of an object, maybe the less stuff total you have to carry. Maybe you don't need a dedicated this thing or that thing if something else can suffice. One thing you can do with a ferrocerium rod is you can, I don't know if you know this, but you can scrape some of the material off. Not scrape it hard enough to create a spark, but literally like scrape some of the material off and make a pile to help start a fire. And then when you spark in your tinder, that amalgamation of different materials that are in the ferrocerium rod that are in your tinder can really help get that fire going better. So yes, you can just strike into a tinder bundle if you know what you're doing and get a fire started. But if you are having a hard time, you can scrape some of that material off your ferro rod and then hit a good spark and then get a pretty hot small fire going to help ignite your tinder, which then in turn should help ignite your sustainable fire. That's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. This is from 1 Samuel And all the assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. That's David talking right before he slays Goliath. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.